Let me read a quote. A lot of the members in here will know this quote from a gentleman named Sun Tzu. And then I'm going to play a video if I can get this thing queued up. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. That's really important to understand that. And we're not talking about going to war here, but I am going to talk about, and you'll see the connection when I show our little video.
Pulls up next to me and approaches my car with a gun. You just don't see anything like that ever coming.
For the first time since an attack outside a gym near Hilliard, a young woman is talking about how she fought back to stay alive. Only on ABC6, a tale of survival. It's been just over 3 weeks since a man stabbed Ricky Whitaker outside the LA Fitness off Hilliard Rome Road. He hasn't been caught. Tonight, her message is to women, not the man who almost killed her.
I'm doing better. It's been rough.
March 20th is the day Ricky Whitaker's world forever changed.
No, I didn't feel pain. I just remember thinking, you know, this can't be real.
A chance meeting with a man who almost left her parents without a daughter. Whitaker showed up to LA Fitness on Hilliard Rome Road just like she did every morning for her workout.
Pulls up next to me and approaches my car with a gun. You just don't see anything like that ever coming.
She says she's never seen the man before. Whitaker believes she was about to be kidnapped.
And he told me to get into his car, and he told me 3 times, and I kept saying no, no, and that's when he pulled out his knife.
She says he then told her to get in the passenger seat of her car. Her instinct was to fight.
All I could think is, if he's going to use this gun, he's going to have to use it here.
Whitaker says he wasn't interested in her purse or wallet.
I think the second time is when I stood up and shoved my purse in his face, and that's when he stabbed me.
She screamed, turned on her heels, and bolted for the gym, adrenaline fueling her escape.
And I don't know if he chased or if he just got in his car or what he did after that, because he didn't look back.
LA Fitness staff called for help. The wound was deep. Surgeons had to remove her gallbladder.
He lacerated my liver and my portal vein, and so that required about a gallon of blood to save my life.
Whitaker doesn't have words for her attacker.
I don't think he's big enough to receive a message from me.
Only for women who may meet the same fate.
And I would say always be aware of your surroundings, you know, be prepared to defend yourself.
With what happened now behind her, Whitaker says she's moving forward.
I can't live my life in fear of that. I can't let one person change the way that I view everything.
That's pretty powerful. And I wanted to start out with that. You see my quote, although we're not talking about going to war, but Sun Tzu tells us that we need to be prepared. And if we're prepared, then we can win the battle. And that's real important. And so we're not talking about Ricky Whitaker or anyone in this room preparing to go to war, but we are facing the threat every day, whether we're in Brentwood, Green Hills, Bellevue, Jolton, downtown Nashville, it just doesn't matter. Let me read some crime statistics. Every time I pull this up, it blows me away. And these are the latest statistics, but I have to read them to you. I want you to understand them. This is national. A violent crime every 27 seconds. Murder every 37 minutes. Robbery every 90 seconds. Aggravated assault every 43 seconds. A rape every 90 seconds. In the state of Tennessee, this is the 2014 statistics from the TBI. There were greater than 150,000 violent crimes. There were over 300,000 crimes against property, but guess what that includes? Burglary, robbery, car thefts, which all could lead into bodily harm. Over 80,000 drug-related incidences. So there's probably over 560,000 crimes committed in this state in 2013. That's one every 2 minutes in a violent crime. I remind people of that because it's important as we live in our bubble and we raise our kids in bubble wrap and our grandkids, because it's real important to understand there is a threat out there, and that's the mission that we at the Vigilance Group have taken on. And I'll tell you how we took it on and why. But let me first of all tell you, I'm not a security company. That's not what we do. We're not a fight school. Do we know how to fight? Yeah, we know how to fight. Do we know how to teach it? Sure we do, but that's not what we're about. We're upstream of that. We're a vigilance company, and we want to teach the 3 A's of vigilance, and they are awareness, avoidance, and then action, and we'll discuss those. But let me tell you how we got started, because this is critical, and it was real personal to me. But in 2008, and I mentioned earlier, let me just say in 2002, Bob Yeager and Charlie Leach and my twin brother and a good friend of ours, Warren Goodman, started a company to do anti-terrorism assessments for hospitals. This was after the walls came tumbling down, and Uncle Sam would not take me back in the service, which devastated me. And I said, why not? And they said I'd been out too long, not that I was too old. But nonetheless, we started a company doing anti-terrorism work, and that's where I got involved with the Israelis, and that's where I got involved with the hand-to-hand fighting and that sort of stuff, because I really wanted to understand the threat. Well, that threat, because of whatever reason, I like to think our political system pretty much negated the threat on our shores, and then something happened in Virginia Tech called the Virginia Tech Massacre. That happened in 2007. When that happened, it got my attention. I said, man, we have, in our own shores, we've got to learn and teach people how to protect themselves. So I started shifting gears on my thought pattern on what I wanted to do. In 2008, there was a tragic murder at Auburn University, a little girl named Lauren Burke. And it was the first homicide in Auburn in 153 years of its existence. This was personal to me because I had 2 children and grandchildren down there. My daughter was a sorority chapter advisor. And I'll just tell you, without going into all the detail, but Lauren Burke was abducted from her dormitory on a Tuesday night, 8 o'clock. No bad behavior, no alcohol, nothing that would get her in any kind of trouble. And she was abducted at gunpoint from her car in the parking lot on campus. God was waiting on the perfect lamb. He didn't know Lauren Burke. She was about 5'2", but more importantly, she was by herself. She comes to her car and he puts the gun in her face. He says, if you scream, I'll shoot. Get in the car. She didn't know what to do, and she got in the car. Now he's sitting next to her in the driver's seat, and she's pulling out money. She's trying to bribe him. She's trying to do whatever she can, but he doesn't want that. He wants her. She was abducted. He drove around the parking lot or around Auburn's campus for 15 minutes while she had her take her clothes off. He's driving her automobile. She's 19, freshman. He takes her off campus. Probably in that 15 to 20 minute time, she started breathing. Remember, we in the service learned how to deal with fear. She started breathing and realized what was going on. She tried to escape, jump out of the car while it was moving. He shoots, hits her in the head. Hits her in the lungs, and which wasn't a kill shot per se, but she's in the middle of a desolate area at 9 p.m. at night. They find her about 15 minutes later. He takes her car back and torches it with gasoline to burn the DNA. And that's the fire department responds to the car. Whose car is this? This belongs to Lauren Burke. She's a registered student. We haven't seen her, and they find her body about 20, 30 minutes later. Now, it's a horrible story. When I got the call the next day, I was driving back from Atlanta. I'd gone by to see the Air Marshal folks. That was my field office, and my daughter calls me crying. She's 32 at the time, and she says, Dad, something horrible's happened. The girl's been killed. I'm a sorority chapter advisor for a sorority. And she says, Dad, my girls are scared to death. And this is probably the greatest thing she's ever told me as a parent. She says, Dad, when we were little, you used to teach Lindsay and I, her sister, how to escape and survive. I was a fighter pilot. I was a hardcore. I had beautiful daughters. I didn't trust anybody. But on the same token, I'd come to a lot of training, and we understood, for all of us in here that have served, that have gone through any type of search and escape and evasion course, your best opportunity for escape is right now. Let's make it happen. Let's go while there's a lot of confusion. And so that's how I raised my daughters. I went to Auburn. That's how the Vigilance group really changed gears, and we started helping kids and I spoke to 2,000 people. By the time I got there, the athletic director was involved, and I spoke to Auburn University. So that's how we got started, and it's really important to understand this because we've taken this as our mission, and we started out in college kids. We've shifted gears now to businesses, and I'll tell you why in just a second. This is an important statistic, and if Lauren Burke, and I'll end with a quote from her father when I conclude. If you're moved to a second location, Joe refers to it, you got to get off the X. But if you're moved to a second location, that could be the bathroom, that could be the back locker room, that could be the bank vault, that could be a car. When you're moved, 93% of the time you're going to die that day. That's statistics. There's no emotions involved in that. If you're moved with a weapon, you're going to die that day 93% of the time. Now listen to this statistic. Again, this is factual. 85% of all handgun wounds are survivable. 85%. Think about that. Now I know everybody in here, I can dare say, and I'm just going to assume everybody shot a handgun in this room. Handguns are difficult to shoot. Joe will tell you, and Joe has great stories when he speaks about some of the things they've done in the SEAL in terms of training. But once your blood pressure gets up, and you as a bad guy, and the fight is on, you're accurate to about 5 yards with a handgun. There's just a lot going on. So we make sure that when we teach this, that we talk about handguns. It's real important to understand handguns. Now let's talk about Ricky Whitaker just a second. When he approached her, and this is important to know, and I won't stand up and tell what happened, but when she drove up and gets out of her car, she goes to her back seat to get her gym bag. He walks up with a handgun. And when he comes to her, he says, come with me. And she said, no. Gun's pointing right at her. He says it 3, and at that point, she turns and sits back down in the front seat of the car. If I could talk to Ricky, that was probably the only mistake she made. She sits back down in the front seat of the car. I said she went back into the coffin, if you will. But she sits down in the front seat of the car, and 2 more times. Come with me. No. No. Now here's what we've learned. This has become an intimidation tool. He didn't want to shoot her. Why didn't he want to shoot her in the public parking lot in front of LA Fitness? 2 reasons. He wasn't there on a homicidal mission. He was there probably as a perverted mission to try to get her sexually. And that's important to understand. Don't get confused with Columbine. Don't get confused with what just happened at the church down in Charleston. Don't be confused by active shooters. That's a different scenario. When somebody comes in, it goes bang, 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 reload, bang, bang, bang. Those are different scenarios. I'm talking about when a lone person comes up with a handgun and says, come with me. Remember that, because it's important. She didn't do it. He puts the gun up, the knife came out. Now it became personal. The knife is a silent killer, and nobody wants to get into a knife fight. So when the knife came out, I think she probably realized the elevation of what's just happened, and she takes her pocketbook, and now remember, she's sitting in the front seat of the car, feet on the floor, and she stands up to go through him with the pocketbook, and that's when she got cut. Here's what I would say. Wouldn't it have been nice if she'd been outside the car? Standing, perhaps. Maybe she could have found an avenue of escape without having to go through him. I just share that with you. I'm not picking on Ricky Whitaker, because she did a great job, and she's a survivor, and she's willing to share her story. But I really want to point out about handguns, and for those of us that have shot a lot of handguns, with the exception of Joe Coons back there, because he's proven me what a good shot he is, I'm just telling you that handguns are difficult to shoot when people are moving, when they're running. And when I talk to our crowds, and somebody will say, well, what if he starts shooting at me? Because I'm a big believer that they probably will not shoot, because they haven't got what they wanted. He may hit you. He may hit you. The truth is, you probably won't even know it. And so a lot of times in law enforcement and military, they'll do a blood check after a firefight just to see who's been shot. We don't know if he's been shot or not. And Joe will describe in his experience that handguns just poke holes in you. It's the rifle that does the damage. So that's important to understand that. So this is all part of what we teach. And Lauren Burke, we talked about what happened to her, and I wish that I could have spent some time with her. It was a senseless, ruthless killing, a terror act, if you will, that should have never happened. So now, the Vigilance Group. Let me read this. This is, I credit Arnell, came up with this, and it was powerful. I've never used it until recently. She went to Webster's to look up the word vigilant. Vigilance, actually. It's a noun. The process of paying close and careful attention to the possibility of danger in one's surroundings. Watchfulness, especially to avoid danger. That's what we do. And so the Vigilance Group, we're here to teach people how to live safely in a dangerous world. You're not getting it all today, but this is what we do. How to live safely in a dangerous world by cultivating your personal power that you have inside of you on vigilance and safety, because we all have it. And I can tell you, even the women in here that are small in stature, and even the ones that are single out here that are, regardless, if you have a child, how many parents do we have in here, females that are parents? Okay, now put your hands down. How many mama bears do we have in here if somebody were to take your child? Yeah. So, and that's important to understand, because guess what? That's inside of you. And so that's what we try to cultivate to bring out of women, because here's, from the business side of it, 60% of the workforce right now are females. In fact, it's probably 65% of the workforce. Certainly that's the percentage in colleges right now. So from the business perspective, which is where we're really focusing on right now, because we know the high schools and the colleges, they're coming to us right now, and we know the parents, and there's the collateral out there. But from the business perspective, let me just share this with you. To replace an employee, a good employee in your company, if they just left tomorrow, okay, without any kind of a reason, 16% to about 25% of their annual costs of what they pay to retrain a new person. So let's talk about that. $50,000 employee, probably 20% to retrain to replace them. That's a $10,000 nut out of the employer's pocketbook to get another one just to replace them. Now, that's without having to do funerals, for one. I hate to say that, but having to do the copay. The insurance prices have gone up. We think from a wellness benefit. I tell businesses all the time, hey, do you give smoking cessation patches to your employees so they don't take smoke breaks? Oh yeah, we do that. You let them go to the gym so they can get rid of something, lower their cholesterol and live longer? Oh yeah, we do that. Insurance company likes that. Well, why don't you protect them? Because you're the greatest asset you have. It's not your great building that you might have down on Lower Broadway. It's what's inside it. So we really make a big point of trying to go after the businesses from that perspective. The cost, you can't stand the loss of that. So we talked about you can't be replaced. In fact, Arnell, I really appreciate this, because Arnell came up with, we were brainstorming 2 weeks ago, why vigilance? And she showed me about the 5 words, and she said, because you cannot be replaced. Period. And that's why we do this. So let's talk about awareness. Awareness is just you have that right, and you have the permission not to be a victim. And I sometimes tell that to women when they say, hey, what do you do? I say, I give you the permission not to be a victim. And they have to think about that a second. What do you mean permission? How do you give me permission? I bring out that line inside of you. Joe brings it out. That's our mission, is to make you fully understand that. Avoid. This is real important to understand. To avoid a crime of opportunity, remove the opportunity. How many soldiers and warriors we have in here that have saw something going south and said, I'm not going there because it's not going to be a good situation? I can tell you as a fighter pilot, where I've been outnumbered way too many times, I think, man, I'm not getting in a turning fight with any of these guys. Somebody's going to pop me from behind. And we used to say about MiG-17s and MiG-19s, it was like, and I say this in loving terms, it was like getting in the phone booth with a midget with a knife. You're going to get cut. And so you tried not to dogfight with somebody that was smaller that you knew. So you knew your threat. So from avoidance, if you just avoid it, if you remove the opportunity. The action side of this is really, we call it the body in action, but I'm going to give you, you're going to take away, you're not getting the full-blown treatment here from what we teach, but I'm going to give you a tip today on action. Because remember, we talked about awareness and we talked about avoidance, and then we have action. Now, action could be a lot of things. It could be just saying, hey, I'm almost out of gas. I'm not going to go down on Lower Nolensville Road someplace to get gas. I'll stop short of that, and that's an action. You went through a thought process to fill your car up, or as an example. But this action I'm going to show you right now is when something happens bad to you. So what we've learned from our Navy SEALs is that in their fights, and Joe has shared this with me many times, it's surprise, speed, and then violence of action. If you can't win on the surprise and the speed, then the violence of action can win the day. And that's real important to understand. So now, Here's what I'll have you do. I'm going to have you stand up in just a second. Everybody's going to participate because what I'm going to share with you may diffuse 95% of most altercations. And it's, for Southern women, it's a little more difficult because we are polite and we don't like to scream and make noise. But it's your voice. Your voice is always with you. So when I tell you, you're going to stand up and you're going to build a fence. And the fence is going to be hands out in front of you, just outside your 90 here, so you can't be collapsed. And you're going to build strong here, and the hands are up to protect your face, not so far apart so you can't get punched in the face, but you can deflect. This is what the Israelis have taught us how to fight. And you're going to, from your gut, you're going to scream, back off. Sandra Lee might say something else. She might say, and by the way, when I do this, I've done this at the parochial school several times, and I have the nun standing over next to me, and I'll say, girls, you know, we're in your school, so say back off. But in the street, it may be a different language, and it's okay to use a stronger language. They understand that. So everybody stand up. So we're not going to have much time to think about this because you'll be embarrassed. And here's what I tell people in our classes. If you're embarrassed here, God help you in the street, right? You got to get past that. It's being able to breathe. So on the count of 3, your hands are going to go up. You're kind of in a neutral stance here. Maybe you'll go to a fight stance. You lean slightly forward. The Israelis will tell you, attack the attack. So, and I tell people all the time that if you're being approached by a stranger, and whether it's a man or a female, and us men are the same way, and I do the same thing every time. On the count of 3, I want the fence to come up, and I want you to scream, back off. We'll do it real quickly, and I'll do it. 1, 2, 3, back off! 1, 2, 3, back off! 1, 2, 3, back off! Now, when I do that, my veins pop. Do you guys feel that? All right, sit down a second. Now, what you just did, and I tell people all the time, that may be all it takes. That may be all it takes, because here's what the predators do. They go after single people, men or women, think that we can take them out. They're cowards in that regard. If you show strength, if you come back and throw that up, all of a sudden they got to reevaluate this. She wasn't very big. I thought I could take her jewelry, but all of a sudden she came at me like a lion, and I don't know what I have. Now remember, if you're approaching the public, they want to do it quietly. You know, bad guys, believe it or not, do have some semblance of some smarts in terms of not wanting to be caught in certain regards. They don't care about closed-circuit TV, by the way. They could care less about a closed-circuit television looking at them. They do it all the time, right? However, if you make a lot of noise and come out strong, then you might can diffuse things. I'll tell you a short story, another story that happened 2 weeks ago. I'll come back. Can everybody hear me okay? 2 weeks ago, we got called, a friend of mine who's very successful in town. His daughter's a 25-year-old, lives in East Nashville with 2 other roommates. That's a hot spot, right, East Nashville. I think sometimes they don't look at all the crime statistics when they move there, but there's a lot there. So this little girl's come. So my friend, his daughter's 25. She calls her dad and said, "Dad, you're not going to believe what's happened. There's police tape all around my house, and there's police cars." And her roommate came home at 4 on Friday 2 weeks ago. As she's walking up her sidewalk, there's 3 gentlemen. Now let me rephrase that. There's 3 bad guys, thugs, walking towards her. Oh, they don't have a lawnmower. They don't have any equipment with them. As she walks up to her stoop, they follow her up and they say, "Hey, miss, can we cut your grass?" She's 25 now, so she just wasn't thinking. She says, "No, I got somebody cut my grass." And she goes to open her door, and the gun comes out. And they force her into her house. Now, she was outside the stoop when the gun came out. As I go through this scenario in my brain, great opportunity to bust right through them and just start screaming and going and running because the gun comes out. Remember, if he wanted to shoot her, he would have done this. "Hey, miss, can I cut your boom, boom, boom?" Because that's what an active shooter would do. If the gun comes out to threaten her to move her, then she was in a different scenario. She's in that 7% that survive. They take her inside her house. They put her in her bedroom, put her under the covers, and tell her to start counting. She tells her father and her father's daughter that, "I thought I was going to die." I'm going, "You kidding me? Don't die like that." Take the fight to the fight, in my mind. Now, once she's in that, she's got a different scenario. But on the front stoop, she had a better scenario. Maybe to throw the door in their face, go out the back door, jump through them and screaming and going through them to the front sidewalk, whatever the case may be. She's 25 though, so now I've been approached because they realize that there's a whole world out there that they don't understand, and that's kind of a generational. And I'm not saying that is necessarily young people. We all get trapped in that little world that we live in. I had another young lady that works for a very prominent healthcare company in Brentwood, was on a business trip in San Antonio, broad daylight, was walking the river walk from her hotel to go look at the Alamo, and she asked her concierge, what's the safest way to go? Oh, just go down the river walk. It's, a couple of miles, you'll be fine. There's people jogging. As she starts her walk, she tells me, she says, I looked to the side. We debriefed this. She was very traumatized by this. It was a physical assault. She was not sexually assaulted, and she got away. So there's a happy answer here. But as she's walking, she sees a guy to the side. I said, what did he look like? He looked like he was homeless. He looked ugly. And when I passed him, he looked at me with just violence. I said, well, what'd you do? Well, as he looked at me, he scared me. Then he pushed himself off the wall and started following me. I said, well, what'd you think? Well, I was going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I went, Now, I was helping her because I said, I wasn't beating her up. I was just saying, what do you think about that? No, it was not a good decision. I said, no, it wasn't. You should, at that point, when you saw him come this way, you should have gone past him right where there were people standing and just finished it right then. But she didn't know any better, and so she continues to walk. She keeps looking at him. He's real close to her. He finally, I think she might have said something, or he got the hint that something was amiss. Maybe there are other people around. She doesn't tag on anybody else. And she pulls out her phone and calls her boyfriend, who was back in Nashville. And she says, I know, that was a bad decision, wasn't it? And I said, yeah, it was, because what you were doing, you were giving signals to this guy that was following that you weren't paying any attention, even though she was paying attention. And I said, your boyfriend, he was just going to hear you scream. He couldn't have helped you. So she thinks she loses him. She actually has to run from him up by the restaurants, and she thinks he's gone. I can't find him, and she starts walking back. She never made the Alamo. Starts walking back to the hotel. When she says the intuition, and we talk about this, and I'll share it before I close. She says, I haven't been looking backwards for a while, and she turns, he's grabbing her. And as she turns, he's got a hold of her. She takes her right hand and goes right for his throat. I said, did you claw him? Did you grab it? Did you squeeze it? Oh, no, I just pushed him. I didn't know what to do, and she pushed him by the throat. Well, that was enough to scare him, and he backs off, and she screams and starts running, probably the fastest she's ever run, and safely got back. Called the police. Of course, nothing could be done. So we talked long and hard about where she should have been. When we teach our classes, whether it be the business people, men or women, or to teenagers or college kids, we talk about 5 pillars because we think there's 5 pillars of being smart and vigilant. Intuitive is important. You got to understand what your intuition is telling you and respond to it, okay? Emotional is controlling that fear. So all us guys in here that served, and those that have done other things, fear can either be your greatest friend or it can be your worst enemy. And when it's worst enemy, that's when bad things happen. When you say, man, this is bad, I got to suck it up here and do something, that's when you're the strongest. So we talk about the emotional side of that. We talk about the spiritual side. What do I mean by that? You have the right to live. You have the right. All these guys in here and women that have served and done some type of training that was horrible, how did you survive it? Because I guarantee you they had your butt, right? They controlled you physically. You did up here. You had the spirit to survive it. And that's important to understand, whether it be combat or not. So that's the spirit to live. We want to make sure they understand that. We talk about the mental side of it. Mental is just understanding that that's a dangerous alley. I'm not going that way. I'm by myself. I've got to be smart. The action side, of course, is just taking action. And it may or may not be fighting, but Joe and I will tell you that 90% of staying safe and being vigilant is head work. And that's what we teach. We teach head work, we do scenarios, we go over different things that have happened and what it could have been avoided. 10% is physical. And then we'll show you that. We make sure, especially for females, we want them to know that how they can defend themselves and strike. We don't preach beating anybody up. We preach hurting someone just enough to stun so you can run. And that's the throat, the eyes, the nose, the ears, that's the groin. There's several things that you can do which we make sure we teach. If you notice on your table, you have a pencil. It's shameless. We do have our logo on it. But what I want, take it home and sharpen it. And I'll tell you why. This pencil, sharpened pencil, can fly anywhere in the world. Anywhere. Nobody will take it off of it, regardless of what airline. And it's a hidden, it's like, well, this is not a weapon. Oh, it's a weapon. And I tell people all the time, particularly young people, you've got all kinds of soft tissue. It's hidden. It's an uppercut. It's very hard to see, and you can poke and hurt. And trust me, if you've been poked in the head anywhere with a pencil, you're going to stop and deal with that pain. You, whoever stuck them, out of here, right? Screaming, moving, whatever it takes. So it's really interesting as we go through this scenario of teaching people that you've got teenagers that are not very smart and young adults that are just learning as their brains are being developed and their targets. And then we get into the young mothers that have 2 or 3 kids trying to get them out of cars. They become targets, and we address that as well. Then you get into the where your kids are gone, you're empty nesters, you're in your 40s, maybe early 50s, and all of a sudden you're a lot smarter, but guess what? You're out by yourself all the time, because you don't have kids anymore, and whatever your lifestyle is. And then as we get older and become senior citizens, you're targets again, because you probably have bling, you probably have a nice car, you probably have things. And so it doesn't really stop. We're just trying to make sure that we can do as much as we can. We're focused on the business world. The other will follow. In closing, this is a unique group. I don't know what everybody does and who's fully retired and who's working, but I can tell you that we're either parents or grandparents or we're in the workforce. I know that. So we know we have someone that we care about, someone that we love, someone that works for us. And so here's what we like in closing, that I think the greatest gift, not monetary, the greatest gift of love and respect and care is to give someone the power of vigilance and safety. And we don't talk about it much. And I'll tell you what happened and why I know this. When Lauren Burke got killed, I went 3 straight years at Auburn University to speak to their athletic teams, to speak to the sorority system. After 3 years, I invited Lauren Burke's parents to come hear me speak, because I wanted them to know I was honoring their daughter and that her death wasn't in vain. So I invited them, wrote a nice letter, didn't hear from them for 6 months. I'm driving home one day from Memphis and my phone rings, broad daylight, and I don't recognize the area code. It's from Atlanta. Moose, this is Jim Burke, Lauren's father. Well, if you're a parent, or my stomach, it was like I didn't want to talk. I was scared to talk. This guy had just lost a precious thing in his life. I said, Jim, thank you for calling me. And he says, well, man, I really appreciate what you're doing. He says, thank you very much. But he said, it's too soon. I can't do it. I can't come. I know you're doing great work, but I can't hear what you're saying. Then this is what he said, and it haunts me, and I share with you. He says, Moose, I never taught Lauren anything. And that was it.
Say it again.
He said, Lauren, he says, Moose, I never taught Lauren anything. And the guilt, you could almost feel the tears coming through the phone. I said, Jim, not your fault. Not your fault. Bad guys do things. But he left that with me. And that's important to understand. We do a lot of things for our children, for our business associates, for people we care about, but do we really get down into the weeds and talk about some really ugly things that happen out there? No, we don't. And we have discovered, and why we think we're strong at it and good at it, is because we're not the parent, we're not a police officer, we're not an administrator, we're not a boss. We just come from a different level. We have a vigilance background, if you will, and we've survived just as many of you in here could be right here next to me telling the same story. We've taken it into action, so that's where we are right now. So that's the vigilance group. That's what we do, and we have 5 different levels of seminars. One for a large group that would be a little more specific than this, and then we do level 1 through 4 workshops, which is also the vigilance, and then we also go into the hand-in-hand stuff, because we think that's important to understand. About an hour of vigilance and about an hour and we work up. So Joe, who's developed the curriculum, has done it where you learn something, and the next time you come back, you advance a little bit more and you repeat what you've practiced. It's going from knowing to owning. You've got to practice anything. And everyone that's in here that's been successful, either in business or in the service, knowing to owning. You practice it and you practice it. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.